What about that, Patricia and Dr. Keller? What about that sheer intent to do it? The absolute conviction that you're going to do it?
That is the hallmark of, obviously, of people who commit suicide. They have a very, very strong intention to do it. Now, nowadays, because we have such good medical services, people are admitted to hospital and resuscitated and seen by a psychiatrist usually within 24 hours. And psychiatrists are actually very good at picking up people, such as the last gentleman described, with high intent once they are brought to us. And this emphasises Michael's point that the worrying thing about the young suicides now is that they're not coming forward. So we're not being given, doctors, GPs, psychiatrists are not being given the opportunity to identify those who are most at risk and who are acutely at risk at the time. And that is very sad, because we now have an array of treatments, not just drug treatments, but talking treatments as well, that can be used when people are suicidal and have high intent.
I'm just thinking of a fatuous comment, which is that I could never imagine in my own mind things being so bad that I would be driven to do that. And the amount of courage, I mean, the horrible, ghastly way that Gerard died, and the other people who hang themselves, the courage required to do it. Yeah. Michael, yes. Yeah.
Just a comment that but prison is an unusual place insofar as one has to be very determined within prison to end one's life, extremely determined, and show ingenuity, as the speaker has said. But in the general community, most suicides are actually ambivalent. And one good reason for being confident in that statement is that if one interrupts a suicide, someone who is apparently intent on ending his life, such as one person I know who failed to cut her throat, having made a very good attempt to do so, failed to end her life, I should say. Well, that person is alive and well today. So it is important to realize that intent is a never absolute over time. What determines the outcome often is the method. Unfortunately, hanging is a method, which is, if the rope is tied properly, there is no comeback. In the United States, shooting with handguns is a method. There is no comeback. Whereas if one had done other things, then there is time to change one's mind. Unfortunately, there are also times, as I think the speaker earlier tonight, who very openly spoke of his son who took paraquat. My memories of one young woman who took paraquat was that she had changed her mind, but she was now sitting up in bed and regretted what she had done. She knew, and I knew, and everyone else knew, that she was going to die, which was precisely what she did. The same time, it takes 5 days.
Yes.
To reiterate what Michael is saying, the thing about intent is that within 3 to 4 days it can actually drop considerably. So somebody can be actively and acutely suicidal one day, and with intervention within 2 or 3 days that can have diminished, so that the person has come out of this quagmire of despair and can see hope and can begin to address the problems and rebuild their lives again.
Right, we'll take another commercial break here. Thank you very much indeed. Come back to us after this. Thank you. There are many telephone calls coming in, ladies and gentlemen, and congratulating all those people who spoke so openly and publicly. So many people talking about the shame and the stigma. And they wanted to know how many of those people, if any, have said, I will never ever forgive the person who committed suicide. Did anybody? Never ever forgive? No, nobody. Okay, thank you. This is Josephine Hurley, and she is the mother of Geraldine, with whom we spoke earlier on, and it's Josephine's birthday today, and also it's Mother's Day weekend. Congratulations to you, Josephine. There you are. Happy birthday to you, and many happy returns to you, because to celebrate, we have a little thing for you, Josephine, for coming along tonight. It's a Mother's Day chocolate heart by Caffrey's of Dublin, third generation of chocolate makers, and they put this together for you. And there's a little flowering begonia plant as well from Phoenix Park Garden Centre, for Mother's Day and for your birthday. Actually, there's one for everybody in the audience, as a matter of fact.
Thank you.
Happy birthday to you anyway, and I hope you enjoy it. I know it seems incongruous, one for everybody in the audience on such a night, talking about such a somber subject, but you've all been so incredibly good coming along and talking to us so openly about a very, very tricky situation that there's no reason at all why you shouldn't have a little Mother's Day gift or a birthday gift or whatever. Jimmy Lofty.
Of victims, I found it difficult to communicate with them, in that I was afraid if I said something that I would say the wrong thing and add to their grief. And I found that my colleagues had the same difficulty. And I then decided to speak to the relatives and ask them what they expected from the guards in particular, whereas the guards were very competent when dealing with under the situation under the Coroners Act. They had a difficulty on a one-to-one situation. Sure. So as a result of this, I have put a package together which I deliver to students at the Garda College. And it's basically more or less what has been spoken about. I hear, for example, people saying that they wish to speak to someone about what had happened. And we would be encouraging guards to call back at regular intervals and give the people an opportunity to speak about their experience and to ask questions of the guards that, for example, about an inquest. They may not know what an inquest involves. They may not know the procedure regarding inquests. And I do think that information like that is valuable for them.
So they're coming out a bit better informed now.
I hope so, yes.
Better informed, very good. And this was off your own bat, was it, you put it together?
It was, yes.
Yeah, very good, very good. You wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to come back to the whole notion of prevention, which I actually feel isn't getting sufficiently addressed, and I know we're awaiting the publication of the task force report. Yeah. But about working in schools and about having a life skills program that works in schools, in primary schools and secondary schools, about having adequate psychological programs, services to primary and secondary schools, and having parenting programs that work with parents. I think there's just so many different avenues that we can look at and destigmatise the whole area for kids.
Yes. Marion Staunton has just joined us up here on panel. She's from Castlebar. She's a field worker with GROW, which is funded by the Western Health Board, and she's a mother of 4. And the reason you became involved with GROW is deep, deep depression, Marion. Can you describe that depression for me?
Well, Gay, it was a feeling of down feeling all the time. Yeah. I felt irritable, cranky, fearful, isolated. I felt alone and lost. And I didn't want to go out. And even when I did, and when in a crowd, I felt separated from other people. I often thought it was like being in a bubble, you know, just separated and isolated. And everything seemed right in my life. I had...
It wasn't because you wanted for anything. You had a reasonable lifestyle.
That's right. I had a caring husband, 3 children at that time. I had everything I wanted really in my life, and yet nothing seemed to be right. And it was a feeling of almost despair, helplessness, hopelessness, just almost despair.
And had this started at an earlier age, and did you carry it with you through the time you got married and had your children, or did it start somewhere?
Even at that stage, Gay, I didn't realise I was depressed. In hindsight, I did realise...
Even as a girl?
Even when I was in the depths of depression, and it was like a hellhole, really, I didn't realise I was depressed. And my husband suggested I get help. And I got very angry. I still didn't know I was depressed. And in hindsight, when I got help, that's when I saw where I was at and what it was like.
Must have been a trial for your husband and family.
Yes, it was. It was.
You mean you were permanently in bad form?
I wouldn't say permanently. A lot of the time I was. And each day seemed a drag. And whilst I appeared to cope well on the outside, inside I felt I wasn't coping. And I was coping. I coped with my husband and my children and my home. But I felt terrible all the time.
It's the black dog.
I often said it was like the black hole.
Black hole.
And it seemed to be, there seemed to be no light. It seemed to be just this permanent...
Did friends mean nothing to you? Pals?
They did mean somewhat. And I would have conversations with friends and I would laugh and have fun in a kind of way, and then they would go on the black hole. I would be in it again.
Bump. So how did you overcome this?
I overcame it by, first of all, going to the doctor. Actually, it was on the Late Late Show many years ago that I saw a psychiatrist, a lady psychiatrist. She explained what depression was and the symptoms, and I thought, that's what I have. And it was then I could accept it. And she also said it was okay to have depression. And that was the first time I heard it. Up to that, it was a stigma. And I was afraid to tell anybody, afraid I would be judged, afraid I would be seen as crazy. And I wasn't.
You never went so far as to think of suicide?
I never went so far, no. But I did feel helpless and hopeless and really didn't know which way to turn. I didn't know that there was anything out there to help me. And I really didn't know what I had.
And you always had negative thoughts about yourself?
I had a lot of negative thoughts. I didn't know it at the time. It was many years later, when I became more aware of my thinking, that I realised I had negative thoughts.
What, that you weren't fit for anything, or you weren't any good at anything, or what? Yes,
I felt I wasn't much good at anything, but really I was very good at things, but I couldn't see that.
Yeah, yeah. Where's Mike Watts? There you are, Mike. I knew you were where you were all the time. I just wanted to give you a thrill. Mike Watts is from England, and he came to live in Ireland, first in Clare, now in Kilkenny. Tell me about the nothingness, Mike. Well, we have met before and talked about this, but tell me about the nothingness.
Well, I was thinking about that, and it was like, it was that you were a thing for a start. You were no thing, and you were a thing rather than a human being. And I think that was the terrible thing. And there were lots of labels that were given to you. Like, I was told I was pathologically shy, and I gave myself an awful lot of labels, but I'd lost my humanity.
Did you consider ending your life at any stage?
I went through years where it was kind of like an impulsive option, and I was brought up in a very good family where it was definitely considered wrong, and I used to have huge moral conversations with myself about it, and it was a moral issue for me, but it kept presenting itself more enticingly. It did, the idea.
And did you talk to Fran or anybody else about this?
Oh, this was before I met Fran. I didn't have any of those feelings or impulses after I met Fran.
And in what way did coming to Ireland help you?
Well, when we moved to Clare, we moved to a very, very rural part of Clare. And the people there were really human, and they really came out to me. And the whole way of life and the whole way of speaking, like, I'd never heard the word God used in conversation, coming from England.
God?
God. And they used to come into the house and they'd say, God bless all here. And to me, that was a real blessing. And I can remember people saying, look, it's himself. And that gave me such a feeling of importance. And he was himself, who was nothing, coming from England, running away from everything. And suddenly I was promoted.
Or even better, is it yourself?
That's right, yeah. Yeah. And they were just, the whole, I mean, my neighbour Johnny would be shaking hay, and he'd suddenly say, how far can you jump? And there was such a mixture of fun and spirituality and life.
What do you mean by
work.
that?
How far could you jump? I mean, everything was, life in Kilmaley and Clare, everything was muddled together. Fun, music, prayer, work, an interest.
I don't know what he means by that. Does anybody know what he meant by that?
Everything was important. If somebody could jump 6 feet, that was an amazing thing. Well, that's what it made me feel, you know? And did you dig left-handed or right-handed and things like that? I'd never thought of things like that.
Neither have I.
No, they made my life interesting again, and they were questions that I could deal with. I could deal with which hand did I dig with, and could I dig a bank of turf straight? But I couldn't deal with things like, why am I alive, and why am I such a crab, you know, why am I so lousy? I couldn't deal with things like that, but I could deal with fun, and I could deal with coming into the kitchen and being grabbed and say, right, you're dancing around the kitchen. And I was pathologically shy for years. At college, I couldn't go into a room if there were other people in the room first. I wouldn't go to the lecture, I'd go to the pub. So.
There's a lot of that, mind you.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're National Director of GROW in Ireland now, and I know that you travel and help people and so on. In 1 minute, what does GROW do?
GROW gives you a way out. First of all, it gives you a plan that's tailored to your needs, and it's on a weekly basis.
To deal with depression.
To deal with whatever you bring with you, whether it's depression, anxiety, thought disorder, fear, whatever. It gives you a task week by week, and it gives you a piece of a program to go with that task. And the pieces of the program are very, very positive. I can be ordinary. I can do things I'm afraid of. I can do things that repel me. I'm valuable. my life has a purpose, I have a future, because that was the thing. I couldn't see a future. That was the big problem. I couldn't. I just could not see a future.
This is the black dog that we were talking about.
It is, yeah.
The black hole and so on.
Yeah.
Fran, you go along with all of that. You've
I would, yeah.
part of that.
Yeah,
You work for Grow as well.
No, I have worked with Grow.
With Grow,
I
yeah.
was actually at one stage in my life, I was told there was no hope for me. I'd have to stay on medication for the rest of my life. I was taking 15, on average, 15 tablets a day. I was in the solitary confinement, what they were talking about with the mattress and the doors and the anger, and I kicked in the doors, and the second time I ended up in there. I couldn't see how I could have got a hold on anything in there. It's just the anger, the incredible anger inside, that it's either depression or I broke all the crockery in the house. It was just a complete, it's like a monster that you have to learn to fight. And in my experience, you go to the hospital and you get put on a lot of medication, and there is times you can't even drag yourself around the place, and you're not treated as a human being, in my experience.
But nobody finds out what's really wrong with you.
No.
They put you on medication to
That's
get you
right.
down or get you up
That's
or
right.
get you down or whatever, but nobody actually takes time
That's
to
right.
find out what is the matter. You do work for the Samaritans.
No.
Oh, you don't? Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I thought you did work for the Samaritans.
I've used the Grow
You've
program
used
to
that. I
get
see,
my life
yes,
back
yes.
together again.
I see, I
basically.
see. Let me talk to a man you all well know talking about depression. That's Johnny McEvoy, long established in show business. Good evening to you, Johnny. We've talked to you about your depression before. We've talked about how bad it was. How are you?
I'm fine now. I went through a bad time maybe last May, June, for about 2 months, but I'm fine now.
And do you reckon, from your experience, does anything trigger it?
No, it just happens. You see, this is what's... I was just thinking there, listening to the people talking and the terrible tragedies that people have. And
Terrible.
how terrifying a place the human mind is, really, when you think about it, because anybody, I think, is capable of committing suicide. I think anybody is capable of it.
Did you ever think?
No, I didn't think of doing it. No, I didn't. I think, like you said, I was afraid. I would have been afraid.
Just a physical coward.
Physical
yes.
coward.
Yes.
Also, I think my upbringing, Catholic home, the idea of suicide being the unforgivable sin, which is a terrible thing to say. But that was there. But no, not even my blackest, darkest and deepest depression. You refer to the black dog,
Yeah.
like church was a black dog. To me, it's like a black cloud that just descends. And it comes when you just do not expect it. You don't know why or what. You don't know where you are. Suddenly, there it is, and you're lost.
And do you spot it coming? Can you smell it coming? Can you get an inkling that it's on the way? Or
Mostly Odette would spot
Odette
it before
really?
I would even know
Why,
it.
what does he do, Odette? What?
He withdraws.
Withdraws.
Yeah. He becomes lone. You can sense there's a space, there's a gap between. He doesn't, although he's communicating with you, he isn't really communicating with you. He becomes, yes, withdrawn, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then how long did it last, that last time you had
The
it?
last time lasted the best part of 2 months, and I went through a period of deep depression and high elation. And strange enough, I was working on a project at the time.
Your CD-ROM.
CD-ROM, yeah, with my partner, Michael Crotty. And I had come up against a dead-end wall, and I'm a fairly creative person anyway. And I remember Odette was away at the time, and I was at home in bed at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it was beginning to break dawn. And I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep for 4 days, 4 nights. I was just awake constantly all the time, running up and down the stairs.
No, you were up at this stage.
I was
you
up
were
at this
elated,
stage. I was
yes,
going into
yeah.
rooms, out of rooms, sitting down, standing up, drinking coffee, drinking tea. And I got all these great ideas, I thought, marvellous ideas. And I jotted them all down. I was lying in bed writing down these ideas that kept pouring into my head. And bang, I was gone. I was down again. And the elation was gone. And then there was the terror and the fear and the horror and of this weight on my shoulder. And all these great ideas I had suddenly meant nothing until I was on medication, and the medication was changed, and gradually over the period of the 2 months I gradually started to rise out of the depression. The depression is easier to cope with, in fact, than the elation. Depression, you can cope with that easier. And when I did come out of it, then while I was coming out of it, I could then write down what I had thought of while I was elated, while I was depressed. But while I was in each of those stages, I could do nothing.
And what did you write down?
I wrote down a marvellous... one of the scenes in the CD-ROM is about the involvement of the 36th 36th Ulster Division in the Somme, the Battle of the Somme. And I wrote what I think is a marvellous letter written by a make-believe young lieutenant in the Ulster Division, writing home to his parents just before he goes over the top. And of course, he doesn't survive the Battle of the Somme.
Not exactly a cheerful subject.
No, I wasn't very cheerful when I wrote it.
No, indeed.
See, this was the point.
Indeed, yeah.
But when I first became depressed, I had no way of getting any help at the time. But now that's changed, because there are people like these good ladies here from Aware who do help people, and they're there for the help of people like me.
How are you now?
I'm great now, thanks. Yeah,
will you sing us a song then?
I will, yeah.
Will you,
twist my arm,
what would you sing? Twist your arm. What do you sing?
Well, I'll go back a long time. I think maybe it's a nice simple one called Those Brown Eyes. If everybody sings along,
okay.
The chorus,
all right.
yeah.
All right, we will. Okay. To show that there's hope after the session, you go over. Philip is with you, is he? Philip is here. Okay. Just while I get Philip there to line up on that, I want to again I say it's incongruous saying one for everybody in the audience and so on such a thing. But you're so good. You really have been so good and so cooperative and so kind talking to me. I want to tell you, have a look at your screens and look at this because it's big. And it's luxurious, and it's the largest car ferry in Northern Europe, and it has deluxe cabins, and it has all the facilities that one would expect on such a large vessel, and there's a great sense of spaciousness, and a great shopping area, and a carvery restaurant, and an Irish pub, and there's entertainment, and can carry 855 cars, 2,500 passengers. That's 10 late show audiences it can carry. And it's longer than Croke Park, and it's higher than the GPO, as you've all been told. And it's Irish Ferries. It's the new Dublin Holyhead Isle of Inishmore, beautiful ship. And the reason I'm telling you is that there's a voucher for a return car trip and 5 passengers for everybody in the audience from Irish Ferries. Just to show you. Because, what? You can take it to Cheltenham, yes, you can take it anywhere you like. You can take it any time between now and next December. And it's a car and passengers and so on, and we hope you enjoy it. It's a beautiful new ship, and it should be a thrill for you. Marion Wallace, I want to talk to Marion Wallace. Where I have there you are. I'm so sorry. I should have recognized you, because you are the person that several people said you were on the Late Late Show before, and you were a great help to them and all of that. And I know you're a teacher and a volunteer with the Samaritans. You witnessed a suicide on
when I was about 18, I was standing in Piccadilly tube station in England, and I actually witnessed a young man jumping in front of the train, and had quite an effect on me. And it led me to the Samaritans to become a volunteer a number of years later. And I'd like to say something about the Samaritans, because we've been talking about people who've been bereaved by suicide and people who've been depressed. But last year the Samaritans had something like 340,000 calls, and 50,000 of those were people who expressed suicidal intention. So therefore we're talking about we're talking about people who feel terribly alone, and we're talking about people who attempt suicide and their families. Now the Samaritans are primarily there for those who are suicidal, and we try to befriend them in such a way that they would never again, at least for a period of time, want to take their own lives. Now we do that by listening to people, because we are constantly available. People have spoken about the dark hole and the dark night, and Scott Fitzgerald said that the darkest night, it's always 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, the Samaritans are always there, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the day. And we're very ordinary people and very approachable, and you can ring us. Now, we befriend people by listening to them, by asking about their feelings. How are they? We do not hesitate in talking about dying or talking about suicide, and that releases people to talk to us about feelings that they feel are unacceptable any place else. We have all the time in the world, so people don't have to rush. Now, our commitment is total confidentiality. Everything is confidential, and we don't advise or judge. And in fact, we often help people...
That is the important thing. You don't advise or judge.
We're not counsellors. We listen. We don't take people's decisions away from them. Their decision is always their own. And we try to keep in contact with them if they give us permission, if they're going through a crisis. Our empathy extends beyond just a single call. But what we often say to people is, look, this is a very big decision to be talking about suicide. It's a very final decision, so let's talk about it. Because what we have discovered is that people are really in an emotional cul-de-sac, and that they feel there's no avenue of escape. Somebody mentioned here about being in a tunnel and no light at the end of it. And what we try to do with our caller together is to try to explore the possibilities and widen the options and maybe reduce the unrealistic constrictions. In many ways, what we're doing is extending a human person with warmth to another human person. Taylor Caldwell once said that man's real need, his most terrible need, is for somebody to listen to him, not as a patient, but as a human soul. Now, we don't just do that for those who are suicidal. We also seek to alleviate loneliness and misery, and we are very acutely aware of the pain and misery and anguish that's experienced by people who are bereaved by suicide, and have become more so during the last few years, and actually are very open to people ringing us, and we have in some places groups to help people who are bereaved. One thing people may not know about us is that if they're very worried about somebody who they may feel is in despair or maybe showing suicidal intentions, they can actually ring us, tell us their concern, and we will very subtly and very discreetly contact that person and ask them would they like to talk to us.
Oh.
Now people say, how can you help because you're only listening? And perhaps I could best explain how our listening helps if I can quote something a caller wrote for us at one stage and sent to us. And what the caller said was, you are listening to me when you come quietly into my world and let me be me. When you try to understand me, even though I don't know what's happening. When you give me the dignity of making my own decisions, even though you may not agree with them. When you don't offer me religious solace, when you sense I am not ready. When you allow me to deal with my problems in my own way. But most of all, what you have given me is the time and the space to discover for myself what's going on. And then I discover that I'm not alone anymore.
You're great people. You're great people. Well done, Marion. Thank you very much indeed. That's lovely. Thank you. Right now, Johnny, just to show there is life after depression. Johnny, what did you say you're going to do?
Those brown eyes.
Oh, those brown eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, you and Philip, off you go on your own time. Thank you very much indeed. Johnny McEvoy, ladies and gentlemen.
Those brown eyes I love so well. Those brown eyes I long to see. How I long for those brown eyes. Strange as they have grown to be. Just ago today, when my brown eyes went away. Up in heaven I long to be, where a brown-eyed angel waits for me. Sing it if you know it. Those brown eyes I love so well. Those brown eyes I long to see. How I long for those brown eyes, strange as they have grown to be. Last night I passed her on the street. I bowed my head 'cause I could not speak. Another man was at her side. Soon I thought she'd be his bride. Here we go. Those brown eyes I love so well. Those brown eyes I love to see. How I long for those brown eyes, strange as they
Well done, Johnny. Thank you. That's Johnny McEvoy. Just time to say thank you very, very much indeed to all the members of our panel for coming tonight, and thank you to our audience for being such a delightful audience, and in particular thank you to all those people who spoke so tellingly and so publicly and so straightforwardly about a very, very difficult subject. We're grateful to you all. God bless you. Good night until next week. See you then. Good night.